It's another episode of Lighting Answers, the third one in the series. I'm Joe DeGanzik, and I've been giving you my tips, tricks, information, and experience in the worlds of lighting, lighting design, home automation, otherwise known as the Internet of Things nowadays. If there's an app for that, you can probably control it, or soon, probably. Anyway, so the past couple episodes we've had some brief history of lighting and a brief history of myself in terms of why is it that you should even bother listening to my advice. I hope you will continue to do so, but anyways, I've been doing this for a couple decades, and now I'm giving all this great advice and information to you. And so what are we going to talk about in episode 3 is we're going to talk about the regulations. Now, I mentioned this a little bit in the last episode. Now we're going to go a little bit further. And regulations, I'm going to focus right here in the United States, even though you can see this video series anywhere in the world. In fact, the United States was not necessarily behind or ahead because the technology is what is driving this kind of evolution from left to right here, incandescent, CFL, and LED. So at the end of the day, our European friends got started and had their laws passed in 2009, and Brazil and a few other countries in South America started in 2005. But we started in 2007, and it has been phased in. So this was the Energy Independence and Security Act in 2007, signed by George W. Bush, and it was going to be phased in over several years. And so basically now we've gotten to the end of that period where essentially, to borrow an internet meme, all your light bulb belong to us. Or belong to us. Yeah, missed one word there. And it's also from a 1980s movie. But anyways, the government is not going to come knock on your door. The NSA is not going to be looking you up and trying to figure out if your light bulbs are more efficient. None of that. It simply means the manufacturers cannot make these bulbs that are terribly inefficient. And what am I talking about? Are you worried that all of your light bulbs are going away? Well, actually, in some ways, no. But this is what we're focusing on. It's the standard, what would be called the A19, traditional kind of pear-shaped light bulb, terribly inefficient and puts out a lot of heat and doesn't really do terribly well. But, 100 years ago, this was like totally amazing. So anyways, that's what they're trying to get rid of. Even lamps like this are pretty safe. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the future, but these kind of also going away because the manufacturers and consumers have caught on and they just want to be moving ahead. So anyways, the regulations were phased in over a couple years, starting in 2012, 2013, 2014, with 100 watts, 75, and then 40 and 60 watts this year. What it means, like I said, is the manufacturers can't make them anymore, but the companies and the stores can sell through their existing stock. So if you really want to go down to Home Depot or your favorite Lowe's or your whatever hardware store you'd like to go to, you can pick them up in bulk if you do not want to convert over to something like this guy or this guy. If you're not interested in going kind of to the modern era, you want to be stuck in the old days, well, that's just totally fine. You can still burn them, and say you're in the middle of nowhere, you're totally on solar power, go right ahead. They're not going to last that long because they'll ultimately burn out, and then you'll have to replace them anyways. But we'll go into more details about that later. So why is it we're doing this? Why is the government even moving ahead? Why are companies moving ahead? Because, well, lighting can consume 15% of your energy bills, and that's not to say if you live in a warm climate. I've made that mistake several times on previous recordings of this very episode. But anyways, if you live in a warm climate, a desert climate, and you are lighting your home with light bulbs that generate heat, especially in the summertime, you're just adding to your electricity bill for air conditioning. So there's a number of ways that these advanced light bulbs, whether CFL or LED, can save you money and ultimately save you some sort of headaches and hassle and whatnot. And I think through the right type of lighting, it can beautify and improve your life. So let's talk a little bit about lifetime. I said these guys don't last terribly long, and we'll just do this real quick. Incandescents will just start at, they're about 1,000 hours. What does that translate to? About a year or two. with average use for a couple hours a day, not leaving it on 24 hours a day, but a couple hours a day. CFL, 8,000 hours, so that's 8 times as efficient. LED up to 25,000 hours. Now think about that. Say you went and you grabbed one of these. This is a Cree bulb, but you grabbed any of the brands. They're all advertising between 15 and 22 years of life. So if you had a child today or tomorrow and you had a couple of these bulbs in their room, in 18 years they could literally take those bulbs to college, or if they move out or whatever. Think about that in terms of 18 to 20 years of life, depending on how often they're used. And we don't know the true life expectancy of these bulbs yet. The manufacturers have said it's going to last that long, or they're going to last X amount of time, and they're going to get slightly less bright over their lifetime, but they're not going to be like totally dead. We're going to find out in 15 to 20 years, like everyone else. The manufacturers have their testing principles and their ways that they have figured this out, but we have to see it ultimately in real life. So they're probably spot on, but we'll see. Anyhow, lamp efficiency. That was lifetime in terms of less times you got to replace things. So for business, that adds even more cost savings. They don't have to pay people to get up on ladders and factories and replace bulbs. I don't know what factories actually use traditional incandescents anymore, but they might be using CFL, and you still will get lifetime, more life out of your lights like that. So let's take a look at this, lamp efficiency. Incandescent will just rate as like the bare bones. This is like the bottom of the run, right? The bottom. Not so good, not so great. So we'll call that 1X. You move over to something like a CFL bulb, which many times are actually bigger than these guys, or this particular one here. That is 4 times as efficient. It's only using, say, an average of 15 watts to deliver your kind of 60 watt power, or a 60 watt equivalent light output, which nowadays is actually really is measured in lumens, but we'll go into that a little bit later. And then if you move to LED, it's, look at that, 6.5 times, because it's only using 9.5 watts of power. That is a huge savings. And if you add all those different light bulbs up, depending on how light and how many light bulbs you have in your home, that could be a huge savings, and especially for businesses as well. You see businesses all over the map. Of course, over the past 20 years, they've converted to CFL, and then now you look at a lot of businesses starting to move over to LED just because it's more efficient, less amount of times that you have to replace them, and obviously less amount of times that you have to purchase them. And it's a more pleasing light than CFL. So now let's talk about the reason why we're going to change these things, right? These guys, and you can see this right on the screen here because I've just made it bright. The little filament in these guys glows because there's special inert gases, things such as argon and nitrogen in these bulbs. And in halogen bulbs, there's also some halogen gas as well. Those burn brighter and hotter and more white than these guys do. But at the end of the day, it's a filament, it's burning, it's glowing. It's 2% light and about 98% heat. So ultimately, it has that warm romantic glow when it's nice and low like this. But then of course we brighten it up, and there it is with being bright and white hot. And you wonder how hot that really is. I mean, obviously you don't want to handle these bulbs when you've just, turned them off and you're going to replace it or it just burned out, because it's terribly, terribly hot. How hot is it? Over 250 degrees Fahrenheit. That's tremendously hot. That's for a 60 watt bulb. The higher wattage bulbs and the halogen bulbs are even hotter than that. So again, warm climate, summertime, you're using your air conditioning just to additionally cool down your lights if they're on and they're burning brightly at 100%. Even at 50%, they're still putting out a tremendous amount of heat. So what's left? I was telling you that not everything was included in the ban, so to speak. Bulbs like this guy, they call this an Edison bulb or a decorative vintage bulb because you can see the individual, instead of a small little filament, it's quite a lot of filament and it creates a warm glow. These are very low wattage. This is more like 10 to 25 watts. It's not putting out a huge amount of light, it's just there for ambiance. So these have not been banned, And realistically, at this point, these guys have not been banned. This is an incandescent that is a flood lamp, and it's simply coated on the backside, so it pushes all the light forward instead of doing it in a circular fashion like your traditional regular light bulbs. But at the end of the day, a lot of other types of lighting, stage lighting and rough-handled lighting, lighting that's going to be tossed around, and plant lights, and so many different types of varieties of lamps are not part of the ban. They're not part of the phase out. They're going to be okay. So there's a lot of different options left, and so let's take a look at what you might find perhaps in a store like a Target store. This was actually yesterday morning. I was checking out to see what they had in LED because Target hasn't been stocking LED lights until recently, at least the one that I go to nearby. So anyways, your average store, whether it's a Target or a Home Depot, whatever it is, they're all going to carry their own kind of affiliated brands. They sign some contracts and so forth. And anyways, you'll see, green and blue and red and yellow and orange and all these different colors. This is all the GE line. And they've got the LEDs at the top, and then in kind of the middle of the shelving, they've got the CFLs, and down near the bottom, they've got the traditional light bulbs. Now, you're then going to ask, well, how are they selling traditional light bulbs? How is that even possible? Well, the reason is because they've done, the companies have done some tweaks to these light bulbs, and they've figured out ways to wring the efficiency. So the efficiency, the magic number is 25 to 30%. Now, does that really matter to you? Well, not really. But you can see on this, and I ran the numbers so I know that it's accurate. You look at this, they're selling a 75 watt equivalent bulb that only uses 53 watts. That is an approximate 30% savings. They're also giving you here the lumens, and the reason why is because all the new bulbs, CFLs and LEDs, they don't operate in terms of watts because the wattage is so small. So 800 to 850 lumens is what you really want to look for in something that is a great 60 watt equivalent, maybe 60 up to 70 watt equivalent. And we'll go into some more of those numbers the next episode when we get to LEDs. But anyways, they've been able to wring some more efficiency out and continue selling them, but at the end of the day, they are still only about 1.8 years of life compared to, like I said, 15 to 20 years at the long end of these guys, which would be, if I actually pull up, grab the right bulb, these type of LED light bulbs get that huge lifespan. So, those are the options that are left. CFLs are great. There's the next slide. The CFLs are great for certain things. I don't think they're great for interior lighting, creating a pleasing light. I was just walking past a couple of CFLs in a parking lot the other day, and they were still pink, and they were still they just have a sort of a harsh light. They're very, very bright, and the word is kind of harsh. And I'm being kind of harsh on them, and some people will probably email me and say, you're being too harsh, leave CFLs alone. But CFLs aren't the greatest. They do have mercury, so you got to recycle them correctly. Same goes for LEDs. They're electronics. We'll get into that in another slide. I mentioned that in previous episodes, where to recycle these bulbs. But CFLs have a lot of things in common with their neon cousins, and it was neon that came before CFL, and definitely neon definitely came before CFL, and neon came before fluorescent was really commercialized. And a nice latte, a nice iced latte in this warm summer really would be pretty good now, but I have no assistant. There's no delivery service. So anyways, back on topic. The CFLs, or fluorescent lights in general, operate by basically having electricity. This is a very unscientific explanation. Electricity and energy goes into the tube, whether it's one of these long ones or these curlicue guys, and excites the mercury vapor gas. The gas decides to have a total giant fiesta party with the phosphor coating, and ultimately it glows. And by changing those compositions of the gas and also the phosphors, they're able to produce different wavelengths or colors of light. But they still all suffer this inherent problem that they're just kind of glowy, and they're just super seemingly bright, and they just put out a funky light. Now, for certain things such as photography, video, certain very high-end applications. They've perfected the light spectrum and the light output, and they've made them very, very bright. And for those purposes, they are okay. They're great. They use some special green ones for green screen use. But at the end of the day, for interior general lighting for your home, for nice, warm, inviting lighting, I think they do an absolutely horrific job. So anyways, I would say to avoid them at all costs. If you have them already, maybe wait for them to burn out before you just completely move to LED, unless you simply want to make the jump and do it all at once, or bit by bit. It's totally up to you. So let's move on from there and say bye-bye to the CFLs. The CFLs and LEDs both suffer from the same problem of they don't create this. There is no filament. There's no burning little thing there inside the bulb or the tube or what have you. There's no filament, so there's no easy way to produce that wonderful, romantic, dimly lit glow and ambiance of a bulb like this would produce, or its cousin, a bulb like this would produce at, say, 10% power. So ultimately, you run into a problem, and you run into a situation where dimming is not the greatest. You got to pay for high-end dimmers or high-end bulbs, or you got to mix and match them until you get it right. Happens with LED, and it happens with CFL. CFLs ultimately probably are on their way out over the next couple decades. So we're going to leave that in the past. At this point, we're going to move forward with LED, and that's what we're going to cover in the next episode. So they do have challenges with dimming, and unless you think that dimmed down fluorescent tubes in airplanes produce a beautiful atmosphere, then I don't know what's wrong with you. So like I said, all these different types of bulbs, even your regular light bulbs, should be recycled correctly. They contain metals and glass and all this stuff. Don't just throw them in the trash. Don't send them to the landfill. Go to this website. We don't make anything from this website, and it's a .org. They're not making anything either. Lamprecycle.org will allow you to put in your zip code or your city, state, and ultimately find a location near you, most likely a home improvement store, that'll take these bulbs, recycle them for you, and keep them out of the landfills and make it so that the manufacturers can get them back, which they actually want them back. They'll disassemble them and recycle all the materials as best as possible. And so we've been talking about these three guys, these three different types of lights, and now we're finally, on the next episode, we're finally going to move completely to LED, which is my big thing. I saw LEDs coming into the mainstream years ago, and I just said they've got to get them brighter, they've got to get the light quality output better, and ultimately they have. They're still working on a few things. We'll go into that in depth, and I'll make my recommendations to you on how you can convert to LED and do it as quickly or as kind of one at a time as possible, whatever your budget and comfort level is. So we'll also discuss some crazy LED light bulbs like this. I don't know if you want them in your home unless you got like a sci-fi theme going on. This is called the Nanoleaf, or it may have now been renamed to the Nanolight. It was a Kickstarter project, and they wanted to create the world's most efficient light bulb. They did, but on some reviews they say the light output quality isn't the greatest. It's a little bit higher or bluer than it should be, and they don't dim, which for me is a big no-no and a big total loss. So I wouldn't go with this, except I might get it just to test it and show you guys. But in general, I'm going to be recommending light bulbs and systems and modules and dimmers and all these kind of things that work in the real world and that you should buy because they've been tested immensely by many people, including myself, with great results. So we'll go back to these guys, and this is a Lighting Answers. We do want your feedback, and we do actually have some feedback. I'll grab my iPad here, hidden under the table, and we'll go, if I get it right. So we had some feedback from our viewer Chris, and he mentions that he's got 5 Cree LEDs in his trunk of his car. That's great. Hopefully they'll get installed soon. 3 daylight white, the cooler light, looking more like the sun, and 2 warmer white light, or soft white, and that is a lower color temperature. We'll go into more of that later. And they're more warm, like you would expect, a nice kind of warm, light, soft white environment. And they're in this trunk because of you. That would be me. Well, that's great. Thank you so much for taking the information. I love giving the information out and seeing that people are actually using it. The other thing he mentioned is he bought them at his local Home Depot on your recommendation. That would be my recommendation as well. And that's something to note, because these new types of LEDs and some CFLs sometimes fall under special rebates, not necessarily from the store like they're having a sale, but from the power company. And the power company may say in a certain locale, well, these are going to be discounted 10, 20, 30%. So you may be able to get a better deal if you shop around locally. One city may have them at $15, another city may have them at 10, another city may have them at 5. Who knows? It pays to actually shop around and look at what the price is and the brands. Sometimes it's actually a brand lock-in as well as it is not just a brand of LED bulb, but it could be locked into that utility company. So it pays to shop around. And so I'm glad that you were able to get those, Chris, and probably at a little bit of a discount. He also said his wife has approved the daylight lamps for her studio. She's an artist. And you were exactly right on the fact that she'd like them better than the warm ones. That's right. For a studio, you want a really, really pure spectrum closer to the sun because, well, let's see, back in the day, that's probably what people used for painting was the sun, since, you know, it was difficult to have lighting indoors. So that's very important to have the right type of light for the right task. We'll go into more of that later as well. And let's see, as for the 60-watt CFLs, he decided to get rid of them. That's great, because I don't like them anyway. So I'm glad that you got rid of the CFL bulbs, Chris, and I'm glad that you got in touch with us. So let's see, we'll put the address on the bottom of the screen there. questions@answers.lighting is the address. Send us your anything, your questions, your comments, your hate mail. If you want us to leave CFLs alone, we'll leave them alone, maybe. Whatever you want to send us, shoot us a message and get in touch with us so we can have a conversation and improve this dialogue about LEDs, CFLs, and lighting in general. Anything on lighting design, home automation, the Internet of Things, apps, whatever. We'll talk about it. And here's all the info on how to get a hold of us. Twitter, Facebook, Google, YouTube. We're on all of it. And of course, the website itself, the blog, is at answers.lighting. I know it's kind of confusing. It's like lighting answers, and it's answers.lighting. It's an internet thing. And that pretty much wraps it up. We're done with most of this education, getting through the history of lighting and the regulations. We're about to move into July, smack middle of 2014. Most of these bulbs, most of the old style bulbs, are pretty much gone from stores, or they're having clearance sales. Now they're just selling CFLs, LEDs, and the other ones that haven't been phased out, or the ones that they've tweaked to, you know, still make them a regular old light bulb, but a little bit more efficient. So now we're going to move on. Episode 4, we're going to talk about LEDs, and a few episodes after that, we're going to get into home automation and some other fun things. I am really excited to share that information with you because I have converted my entire home to LED, and it is absolutely beautiful, and it is no compromise, and I think you're going to love it, and you're going to love the information, and I can't wait to share that with you. So as always, this has been me giving you lighting answers. I'm Joe DeGanzik, and I'll talk to you next time.